Space, the ultimate boundary. These are the expeditions of the starship Acadia. Its 8-year objective: to investigate unfamiliar planets, to discover novel life and civilizations, and to fearlessly venture into uncharted territories. The Kzinti, an alien cat-like species, were developed by Larry Niven in 1966, and they first appeared in his story The Warriors. They reappeared in a number of his later works, and the Kzin character Speaker to Animals, aka Chmee, became a significant character in his Ringworld novels. A number of other authors developed the Kzinti even further. Stories of their adventures appeared in the 14-volume Man-Kzin Wars, and the Kzinti were also inserted into the Star Trek universe, first appearing in the animated series. Now, after reading Larry Niven's story, The Soft Weapon, and thinking they would be a good fit for Star Trek, scriptwriter D.C. Fontana recommended their inclusion to Gene Roddenberry, who agreed. The pink coloration of the Kzinti uniforms and ships in the episode were a result of director Hal Sutherland being colorblind and thus unable to discern them as anything but shades of gray. However, storyboard artist character designer Bob Klein laid the blame on color director Irvin Kaplan, who just happened to like pink. The Kzin originated as a race of aggressive hunter-gatherers on Kzinhome, a dry, cool planet orbiting star 60 in the Ursa Major constellation. Their planet was eventually overtaken by the Jitoki, who were a merchant race of star-shaped aliens who overcame the Kzinti in hopes of using them as mercenaries. And during their subjugation, the Jitoki taught the catfolk how to use advanced technology, including weapons and starships. The Kzinti eventually overthrew their captors and either enslaved or ate them. And this is reflected in the Kzinti royal crest, which has, from mercenary to master, around a bite mark. While generally seen as a male-oriented society, Kzin place a premium on honor and integrity. And this is ingrained in their economic system, where honor and heroics exist as a form of currency. Through genetic engineering, the Kzin males have augmented their size and strength, and they now stand nearly 8 feet high with a weight of around 500 pounds. They have a tiger-like appearance with large ears and a barrel chest, as well as a hunched posture and surprisingly slender waist and limbs. Their bodies covered with fur, which usually is in variations of orange, yellow, and black. However, their tail is bare like a rat's. Their mouth is lined with sharp teeth, and they stand on 2 legs like humans and have paws with 3 fingers and an opposable thumb. And each of these digits is tipped with an impressive retractable claw. Now, the Kzinti speak in a hissing language called Hero's Tongue, whose written form resembles commas and periods. They place a very high importance on individual honor, being obliged to seek personal revenge upon an attacker before calling for help. To be defeated, wounded, or left alive is considered to them the ultimate insult, which can only be remedied by single combat to the death. Now, the Kzinti were one of the first ongoing alien contacts that humanity met within the known space universe. And with their bellicose nature, most of these initial contacts were violent. And the cat people have been in a nearly perpetual state of war with one or other of their neighbors ever since. However, the Kzin have generally done poorly in these interactions. They've had a difficult time keeping up with the technological advances of other galactic factions, and with this decreasingly impressive logistical and technological advantage, each Man-Kzin war results in the confiscation or liberation of one or more Kzinti colony planets by the humans. In short, the Kzinti aren't really a major threat. They predictably always attack before they're ready, following the creed that the more certain one's victory is before the fight begins, the less honor there is to be had from it. The purpose of Scenario 4 is to teach energy allocation rules, which are a crucial part of the Starfleet battles. Up until now, your ship's engineer is taking care of this. However, now it's up to you to control how you utilize your ship's energy. So let's go through the Cadet version of energy allocation. Now, in the energy allocation rules, players use the energy allocation form to determine how much power or energy is available and how they wish to use it. And while you can't use more energy than you have, you can conserve a little bit of it in batteries for later use. Now, as a cadet, you won't use the entire form, just a few lines to become familiar with how the energy allocation works. So first of all, you have the warp engines, and this is the amount of warp power available. and you simply count the undestroyed warp engine boxes on the ship's SSD. And in the Cadet game, there will be 16 for the Federation and Klingon ships. Impulse power is the amount of power available from the impulse engines, and you simply count the number of undestroyed boxes. And in the case of Cadet cruisers, there's 2. There's reactor power, and this is the amount of power from nuclear reactors. Now, most Cadet cruisers have 2 reactor boxes, and they're marked APR, which means Auxiliary Power Reactor, on the SSD. Now, the Romulan and Orion Cadet cruisers have none. And if you add these together, you get the total power. This is the total amount of power available from all sources other than batteries. And at the start of the scenario, an undamaged Federation Cadet cruiser or Klingon Cadet battle cruiser will have 20 units of power. 16 from the warp engines, 2 from impulse, and 2 from APR. Now, the Romulan Cadet cruiser only has 18. The batteries available line shows the number of battery holding power available for use, and all Cadet ships have 2 batteries. And at the start of the scenario, these are considered charged, so you can use this power. There's also battery discharge line, and this is the number of batteries previously used. The total amount of line 5 and 6 always equals the number of undestroyed battery boxes on the SSD. Now, careful players will save their batteries until the ship's heavily damaged, and they can use them to fill in temporarily for the destroyed engines. Skillful players, on the other hand, use their batteries constantly for squeezing out that one additional unit of power. And batteries destroyed in combat are presumed to have been those previously discharged, if any such batteries are available. There's also lines for life support, fire control scanners, shields, and damage control, and we'll learn more about these in later scenarios, so don't worry about them in this one. There's a line for photon torpedoes, plasma torpedoes, disruptor bolts, and other heavy weapons, and the allocation of energy for each weapon is recorded separately on this line here. And the specific method of allocation for each weapon type is covered within the rules on that particular weapon type, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And now notice the movement line. Energy is required to move the ship, and this energy can come from either warp or impulse engines. And importantly, note that no more than 1 unit of power can come from impulse engines, and it will provide 1 movement point regardless of the size of the ship. Now, warp engines provide movement at a rate for the Cadet ships of 1 point of energy to 1 hex of movement. So, for example, to move at a speed of 8, it would require either 1 point of impulse power and 7 points of warp power, or 8 points of warp power. Now, there is a limitation on changing speed in the game, and in the next 3 scenarios, you cannot increase your speed by more than 8 points between one turn and another. And this assumes that you have power to accelerate by that much. Now, you can slow down between turns as much as you like. And remember, you do this energy allocation and speed change at the beginning of each turn, not impulse. Let's give you an example. The constellation's moving at a speed of 5 on the first turn. And on the second turn, it could select any speed between 13, that's 5 plus 8, and 0. And there's no requirement in the rules that a ship has to move at a top speed every turn. Now, also note that at higher speeds, it's more difficult to change direction. And most importantly, note that power from movement must be paid every turn, and it doesn't carry over from turn to turn. There's a total power used line, and this is used for a final mathematical check to make sure that you've allocated the correct amount of power. And this number cannot be more than the total of line 4, which is the total power, and line 5, the batteries available. It can also serve to determine if you've discharged any batteries. And a ship is never required to expend all of its energy. Now, just to reinforce again, except when specifically stated to do so, energy does not carry over from turn to turn. If power was allocated to movement on a given turn, this power could not be used to move the ship on a later turn. And for example, if 5 units of power were allocated to a ship on turn 5 and none on turn 6, the ship would move 5 hexes on turn 5, but it wouldn't move at all on turn 6. And if energy was allocated to disruptors on turn 5 and not used, that power would be lost, and it can't be used to operate the disruptors, or anything else for that matter, on any later turn. Now, it costs 1 point of power to fire a Type 1 or Type 2 phaser. The Type 3 phasers, which are associated with shuttles, cost 1/2 point of power. Now, all ships have phaser capacitors, and these are special storage batteries that are equal in capacity to the total amount of power required to fire each of the ship's phasers one time. For example, the Federation Cadet cruiser has 3 phaser 1s, and its phaser capacitor has a rating of 3 energy points. Now, energy can be held in a phaser's capacitor from one turn to the next, and it can be withdrawn during any impulse to fire the ship's phasers, but it can never be withdrawn for any other purpose. And this energy can be withdrawn for any of the phasers. It could also be used over a period of 3 turns to fire the same phaser 3 times. Now, energy can be added to the phaser capacitor during the energy allocation phase, but none of the total energy in the capacitor can exceed the capacity of that capacitor. Now, if a phaser is destroyed, an equivalent portion of the phaser capacitor is also destroyed, and naturally players may consider the uncharged elements to be destroyed first. So let's give an example of this. The Federation Cadet Cruiser has a capacitor of 3, and the player allocates 3 units of power to the capacitor at the start of the first turn. Now, during that turn, 2 phasers are fired, so there's still 1 point of power in the capacitors. Now on turn 2, only 2 units can be added to the capacitor, as it can only hold 3 units total. And during turn 2, only 1 phaser is fired. Now moving to turn 3, the player decides not to allocate any energy to the phasers, but they can still fire 2 of them because there are 2 points remaining in the capacitors. And if a phaser is destroyed, the empty capacitor is destroyed with it. Now, disruptor bolts are fired as follows. Now, with disruptor bolts, 2 units of energy are allocated for each bolt which is to be fired. And since these bolts are an energy discharge, they can't be held from one turn to the next. Now, any bolts for which energy has been allocated but which have not been fired for the next turn are simply lost. Now, and energy to fire disruptors can be from any power source. Finally, arming photon torpedoes is a little different. To arm a photon torpedo, 2 points of warp energy have to be allocated to a specific photon torpedo tube on each of 2 consecutive turns. And the second turn may be the turn of firing. Now, if you were operating the Federation Cadet Cruiser, which has 2 photon tubes, you would have to expend 4 units of warp energy for each of the 2 consecutive turns to fire a full spread of the 2 torpedoes. Now, if the arming of a photon torpedo has been completed on a given turn, and the torpedo is not fired on that turn, then the ship has to allocate 1 unit of energy for that tube for each turn until the torpedo is fired. And if this holding energy is not paid, the torpedo crew simply ejects the torpedo harmlessly into space. And the holding energy can be from any source on your ship. And an armed torpedo can be held indefinitely, assuming that the power cost is paid each turn. Now, the 4 points of energy to arm a photon torpedo have to come from the warp engines. And the 1 point of power to hold them can come from any source. Let's talk a little more detail about damage allocation in this scenario. Now, it's important to remember to count all damage that penetrates a single shield on one step of a single impulse as 1 volley. And note that damage from drones and or plasma torpedoes and damage from direct fire weapons are resolved separately because they happen at different points in the impulse. Now, each time internal damage is scored, the first point has to be scored on weapons, if 1 is left. And the second point has to be scored on the warp engine box, if 1 is left. And then the remaining points can be scored on any internal box. However, not other shield boxes and not the drone rack ammunition track. Now, the bridge can't be destroyed. Now, when there are no boxes, including excess damage boxes that remain except for the bridge, the ship is simply destroyed by 1 more damage point. Now, when playing this game solitaire, there's rules for the AI of a robot opponent. And we'll go through these to give you kind of an idea of how this works. Now, basically, the robot ship always moves at a speed of 12, and it will always try to fire every weapon every turn. Now, the robot ship will obey the standard rule prohibiting the fire of a single given weapon twice on 2 consecutive turns within a 1/4 turn time period. That's 4 impulses on a 16 impulse system. Now, the robot ship also will follow your ship as a seeking weapon until the first impulse of the turn, in which it's within 4 hexes of your ship. Now, at that point, the robot ship will fire every weapon that can be pointed at your ship. And this is known as the primary fire point, and will theoretically happen once every turn. Now, if this point has not been reached by the end of the turn, the robot ship will fire all weapons that they can bear on the last impulse of that turn. So they're basically firing from a further distance. And now, after the primary fire point, the robot ship will cease following your ship, and it will turn 60 degrees, that is, as soon as its turn mode allows, towards a direction that will allow them to fire any weapon which has not been fired yet on that turn. Also note, when moving the ships, that regardless of any instructions, the robot ship won't leave the map, and it won't turn to a course that would take it off the map before it could turn again. Now, if there are not any unfired weapons available, or if the ship would turn either way to bring a given weapon to bear, turn in the direction of the larger number of weapons. If a robot ship is hit, you don't score the extra damage on warp engines or weapons unless there are no other boxes remaining. And then you score them on warp engine boxes first. And each damage point scored on a warp engine reduces the speed of the ship by 1 point for the rest of the scenario, beginning at the start of the next turn. If you were to score 12 damage points against the warp engines, the ship would be brought to a halt. Now, once a robot ship has fired all of its weapons in a turn, it will continue to move in the same direction until the end of the turn. And finally, note that if a robot ship is armed with drones, it always launches one of them targeted on your ship at the first impulse of every turn. And if the robot ship is a Federation ship, it will fire one and only one photon torpedo each turn, since they're required 2 turns to arm. And if the robot ship is a Romulan ship, then it will launch its torpedo A on the first impulse of the 1st, 4th, 7th, etc. turns. Now let's talk about the setup of Cadet Scenario 4. So patrolling the neutral zone, the Federation cruiser Constellation receives a distress message from the freighter SS Dakota. The freighter has lost engine power and is drifting out of the neutral zone into Klingon territory. Now, announcing its intentions to enter Klingon territory for humanitarian purposes, the Constellation moves in to rescue the freighter's crew. At the same time, Klingon warships appear and begin firing on the Constellation. So you're going to place the freighter SS Dakota in Hex 1405, where it's stopped, the Federation cruiser Constellation in Hex 2817 facing F, and the Klingon battlecruiser War in Hex 0117 facing B, and finally the Klingon battlecruiser Fire in Hex 0116. Now you can add a third Klingon cruiser Death in Hex 0115 facing B, however this is optional. I've found it pretty hard to win this scenario against 3 Klingon battlecruisers, even if they're flown as robots. Now, the objective of this scenario is for the Federation ship to try to rescue the crew of the freighter. And to do this, the Constellation has to move through a hex adjacent to the Dakota. And if the Constellation does this and then escapes off the map through a hex beginning with 28, then the Federation player wins. Otherwise, if the Constellation is destroyed at any time, the Klingons win. Quickly, 10 things to remember in this game. First, no more than 1 unit of movement power can come from your impulse engines. And second, remember that also APR power cannot be used for movement. You cannot, in scenarios 4 through 6, increase your speed by more than 8 points between one turn and the next. Next, only in the case of phasers is power carried over from one turn to the later turn, and that's due to the capacitors. Fifth, it only costs 1 point of power to fire a phaser 1 or 2. Sixth, it does cost 2 units of power to fire a disruptor bolt, and unlike phasers, they can't be held. Next, to arm a photon torpedo, 2 points of warp energy have to be allocated to the specific photon torpedo tube on each of 2 consecutive turns. Next, the power of energy to arm a photon torpedo has to come from the warp engine. However, the 1 unit of power needed to hold it can come from any source. Ninth, you count all damage that penetrates a single shield on one step of a single impulse as a single volley. And finally, when you're scoring damage points in this scenario, the first internal has to be scored on a weapon, the second has to be scored on a warp engine box, and the remaining can be scored on any other internal box, except for shield boxes, the bridge, or the drone ammunition racks. Okay, I think I've got everything set up here. Let me clear this a little bit to kind of show you what's going on. I've got my 2 Klingon robot ships down here. I went ahead and put a little drone here just to kind of remind me that they're out there. I've stacked up all my weapons here, and my impulse movement sheet is here. I went ahead and put the basic impulse chart here. I don't know if I'll need it that much. And then I've got my 2 Klingon robot ships and my Federation cruiser. The Dakota's here, and my Federation ship is down here, moving at a speed of, and that's the first thing we got to figure out. Now, I use the show data form. I think I'll probably start to learn how to use the energy allocation form in a little bit, but so far I'm just using this, and I went ahead and put my phasers down here. So I've got to power everything. First of all, my atomic power, I'm just going to put this over in this next column here. This 2 points is going to go to my phasers right off the bat. So there's 2 points in my phaser capacitor. And then my warp engine has 16, and I can use, let's see, I want to go ahead and start a photon, and I have to use 2 points there, and I can't use the impulse for the photon, so I think I'll kind of go back and forth on photon torpedoes, so I can fire one every turn. Let's see, so I've used 2 points there. That takes me to 14. And impulse, that gives me 1. I can't use impulse on my photons, but I can use them on 1 point here to take my speed to 15, or my move. That leaves me with 1 impulse left over, which I think I can put in my phasers. So that gives me phasers of 3. Okay, I think I've used... I want to be sure and try to use all the energy that I can. So that leaves me with a move of 15. Because I have to use warp for photons. Okay, I think I got it all. That's a good cup of coffee. Okay, so we're going to change our speed for the Federation ship to 15. I probably should be going faster, but let's try that and see how that goes. Okay, so I set my speed over here at 15, and I'm now ready to go. I start with moving ships, and since I can go first turn... Nope, nobody can go first impulse. I keep calling those turns. I'm so sorry. Okay, so first impulse. Now, the only thing that can happen during this impulse is a launch-seeking weapons, and the Klingons have to launch their two drones. Okay, so they have to do it at the first impulse they can, which is impulse 1. They can't move, but they can fire those drones. So he's going to launch drone 1 at impulse. We'll just say impulse 1. And then the other Klingon's going to launch drone 1 at impulse 1. Okay, and then this is my drone counter stack. I'm just going to call that. So we're just going to clone him. And he's here, and we'll do another clone here. And then the drones can actually move because they have a speed of 16. And let's just turn him. Get off there. And just right turn there. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take that, let's take that movement trail off. Toggle movement trail and toggle, there we go. That looks a little better. Nope. Let's try to do that again. There we go. Much better. Okay, so that's it. Everybody's moved, and again, this is just a stack here. So we go to Impulse 2, and Impulse 2, the ships can move. Both ships can move. Ship 15 can move, and Ship 12 can move. So we can start with our Federation, and I'm going to go ahead and move these guys forward 1, just so they're not stacked up. It's kind of hard to keep track of them stacked up. Okay, and that is the end of the impulse. We go to impulse 3. Everybody can move. Okay, end of impulse 3. Impulse 4. Everybody can move. And I'm going to move these guys out. Unless this guy turns, I guess the Federation guy turns, I'm going to just keep those guys going and those drones. Okay, 5. Now this time, the Klingons can't move. Okay, we go to 6. Everybody can move. Yeah, no, like I said, I'm moving those drones out of turn, but that's okay. 7, let's go. And again, thanks to the community out there of you guys in the Starship or Starfleet Battles community. You guys have been awesome. Thanks for all the help you've given me. I really appreciate it. Impulse 8, everybody moves. I cannot see these guys. They're so hard to see. Let's pull this in just a little bit now. There, that helps a little bit. Okay. Only problem is it gets these guys. Okay, impulse 9. Okay, the Klingons can't move again, this impulse. Okay, we go to impulse 10. Everybody moves. We go to impulse 11. Everybody moves. I gotta see where the Dakota is. Let me move everybody first. Okay, Dakota is up. Here it is. That's fine. Okay, impulse 12. We're getting close to having something happen here. Okay, impulse 13. Klingons can't move this time. Oops. Okay, and then I think what we'll do on impulse 14 is I'm going to turn and fire and try to take these drones out. So we go to impulse 14. We turn to the right, forward, and then these drones move closer, and the Klingons move closer. And they're still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexes away. So that actually helped a little bit. Now then, I'm going to fire. Let's look at my energy. I have 3 phasers powered this turn, a capacitor for 3. I'm going to fire my... Let's see, I can fire 1 and 2, or I could fire... These go to a rear quadrant, so those aren't going to... Yeah, I'm going to have to fire 1 and 2. I can... That's in... Yeah, that's in either one. So 1 and 2 are going to fire. And this is impulse 14. So impulse 14... and impulse 14. Okay, so I want to try to fire. So I'll do one at one will fire at this drone, and one will fire at this drone. So I need my phaser type 1 table, and I'm going to roll my dice for the first one. I can't see here. A 2. So a phaser at a range of 2 with a 2 is 6 points of damage. So that's going to be enough. So that one will delete him. And then I roll a 5. Okay. Range of 2, 4 points of damage. If I remember right, those are... So let's see, a 5 would be at a range of 2, 4 points damage, so that's enough to destroy him. They have 4 points. I had to go back and look that up. So that's deleted. So we've blown 2 of our energy points on our weapons. Okay, I'm moving at a 15. I'm looking at my turn mode. I have to make 2 to turn again. So let's go to 15. To impulse 15, and at this point everybody can move, so we'll go forward, forward, and forward. And let's see, these guys are still more than 4, And we go to turn 16. And let's see how far. I think I'm going to have to get into... I'm going to make a left turn and go forward. And this is the last... Everybody can move on the last impulse. So I've really got to quit saying impulse when I mean turn. Now, at this point, the robot orders say the Klingon ships have to fire any weapons that they can. And the Federation cruiser can fire... Photon 1? Can I fire... Phaser 1? That's a RF and right front, and so he cannot. So yeah, he's pretty much dead in the water. He just basically can't use that. But the Klingons can go. Now this is going to be bad for the Federation cruisers. So let's go through Klingon disruptors. I'm going to... And they can do... So they're going to make 4 attacks. They can't use these 2 phasers, but they can use the front phasers. Okay, let's start with Klingon ship 3 here. And that's a phaser type. That's a disruptors I'm going to use, and the phasers types 2. Where's my phaser 2 table? Got too much going on here. Let's see, phaser 2 table. I don't know. We'll pull a new one down. Phaser 2 table. Okay, so phaser 2, phaser 1 we don't have to worry about. Photons we don't have to worry about. I'm going to pull this aside. I don't think we need that right now. Okay, so let's start with our disruptors. Let's fire both of those. So, ship 3, or Klingon, I guess we'll call this Klingon 2. Yeah, we'll try to get everybody straight here. Klingon, okay, that's ship 1. So let's just call that ship 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we fire 2 disruptors at a range of 4. So we need a 1 through 4 to hit. Let's fire the first, okay. Miss and a hit. Okay, at a range of 4, that's 4 points of damage to the Federation ship. And middle to middle, it's going to go through this hex side here. So that's going to be 4 points of damage through shield 6. Okay, that was both the disruptors. Now let's do both phasers for this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're using our phaser 2 table. And we roll a 3 and a 1. So at a range of 4, that's 3 points of damage for the 1 and 1 point of damage for the 3. So 4 more points of damage. 4. Okay, then that's the end of Klingon 1, his firing. Now Klingon 2. Let's change our label here. We're going to change this to 2. Klingon 2 fires 2 disruptors and 2 phasers, same thing. And he's firing at a range of 3. So let's start with our disruptors. And we need to roll a 1 through 4. Miss and a hit. So 4 more points of damage. And again, that's going to be right through that screen, my screen 6. Okay, and then that's the disruptors, and then we do the 2 phasers. Range of 3. I get a 6 for 3 points, and a 1 for 4 points. So 7 points of damage, again through that same one. This is going to be rough. So 1, 2... Oh, wait, first, let's go back. We got to hit a weapon. I'll use one of these rear. We've got to use a warp. I'll use that one. And then I've got 5 more. So we'll use the externals. 4, 5. We don't need the lab or the transporter. So, okay. We've taken our internal damage. Yeah, that would be a nice little feature on here is if you could just click a button to show what's firing. That would be really cool. But instead of damage like it is. Okay, that is it. So our Federation cruiser now has the energy allocation is going to be lower because we've lost a warp. We've taken some damage to our warp engines. Okie dokie. And that is the end of the turn. So we can clear this, and we can go to turn 2. Actually, that should say turn 2 up there. Okay. Now, we got to figure out movement. I could try to outrun them, or I could fire at them. I think what I will do is I'm just going to try to outrun these guys. I'm not sure. They can hit pretty hard. And I can try to use different shields so I can take some shield damage the next turn. Oh, and I got to remember, I can't use these disruptors or phasers for 4 more turns for the Klingons because they fired at that last impulse. Okay, my impulse engines are now 2. My that's 2. So my power now is 19. I'm going to use 2 for my photons. And my batteries are still at 2. I'm going to hang on to those. Actually, I'm going to use 1 battery. And that will give me the same speed. I did fire 2. So I still have 1 phaser in the capacitor. So I think I can take my speed up to 16. So this turn in my my Federation cruiser can move 16. They can fire 1 photon torpedo, and they can fire 1 phaser, which I think that's going to be fine. Like I said, I'm going to try to outrun these guys. So speed will be of the essence. Okay, turn 1. I'll go forward. These guys can't move. Or impulse 1, I'm sorry. And then we go to impulse 2. Now, impulse 2, I've got to remember that I can fire my photon torpedoes. Let's just clone that. Or drones. I said photon. I meant drones. Okay, there's those drones. Now that's the second drone. I've got 4 drones. I'm not going to use them all. And so those guys can fire and move. And then these guys can move. And this guy can move. And then this guy's going to go right and forward. Okay. Now I still can't. The Klingons still can't fire. And at this point, I've picked up the Dakota's guys. So we go to Impulse 3, and he's going to go forward. This guy can go forward. This drone can go forward. And the Klingons can go forward. So forward and forward, I think. I think he's right there. Okay. Nobody can fire yet. Now, 4th impulse, they can. I think everybody can fire, and I can take a shot. I'm going to take a shot at the drones. First of all, we got to move everybody. I'm getting a little confused here. There's this guy. This guy. This guy. This guy, and this guy, and this guy. Everybody's... Okay, ship moves, drones move, and then we do our photon torpedo. which we had armed. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I roll a, to hit, I need a 1 through 4. I get a 4, so that's a hit, and does 8 points of damage through this. Okay, and that's Klingon Ship 2. So this shield takes 8 points of damage. Okay. Then this guy is going to fire his disruptors. Now, disruptors have a FA. Let's see, forward. Okay, this disruptor can fire. So both of those disruptors can fire. And I'm going to be going through the... It's going to go through these two. Let's see, disruptor range is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I get a 1 and a 6. So the 6 doesn't hit, but the 1 does for 4 points of damage. And that's going to go against the shield, either the rear or the rear to left, rear right. Let's just roll odd for rear. So we get odds. Yeah, that's going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 points of damage. And the other one didn't hit. Let's see, that was Klingon 2. I need to just show data here. Disruptor B fired on Impulse 5. Okay. Now this guy is still not in range, so he doesn't fire anything here. Oh, I need to put the other disruptor in here. Show data. Because the robot says that they don't fire until turn. Or the robot says that you don't turn unless they're in 4 hexes. So that's that. Oh, I can make some phaser shots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Klingon. I can fire both of those phasers. And let's see, those are phaser 2 table. I get a 4 and a 5. Phaser 2, range of 4, 4 and 5. So it takes up another point. We'll just put it in the rear. We'll just assume that's there. Okie doke. And then the Federation cruiser could fire 1 of its rear ones, and we will fire that with a 1. Okay, so range of 4 with a 1 is 5 points of damage on the Klingons, and that's going to go through this. Oh, it's going to go through this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and my 5th one has to go to a phaser, so we'll go against that one. Now this guy will have to make a 60-degree turn in the next turn and try to fire with his rear phasers. That puts him, I guess he could go here. He really needs to get closer. I always think for the robot they always need to be approaching. I think that's how the robot rules should work, but that's just me. Okay, Impulse 5. Impulse 5, the ships get to move. The Federation gets to move. And these guys get to move right forward. Right forward. Okay, the Klingons do not get to move. We go to Impulse 6. And let's get these out of the way. I'll put them over here for now. Yeah, the thing about this too is you always have these little guys running around everywhere. All these little sheets of paper. They're not paper, but... Okay, 6, everybody gets to move. So I'm going to go... forward. And then these guys will go forward, 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 and forward. Okay. 7, everybody gets to move. Let's go right, forward, 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 and forward. Let's see, I've used all of my Federation ships stuff, so okay. Impulse 8, forward, 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 and forward. Okay, Impulse 9, he gets to go forward, 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 and the Klingons don't. But this Klingon down here gets to fire, and we are going to use, this is Klingon 1. Whoops. Let's get rid of those. Klingon 1 is within 4 hexes, so it gets to fire both front phasers and both disruptors. So we fire, let's see, we want disrupt. Let's start with our disruptors, and he's 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes away. We roll a 5 miss and a 5 miss. Okay, and then the 2 phasers get to go. I roll a 3. That's a 1 point of damage, and a 4, which is 1 point of damage. So it takes 2 points of damage through this, let's see, right rear. One, 2. Okay. Not too bad a deal. Okay, we go to 10. Everybody gets to move. Forward. And forward, forward. Okay, we go to 11, forward, 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 and forward. And this is going to work out because I can use my rear, I can fire off those 2 rear phasers. Okay, 12, everybody goes. Forward, 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 and forward. And I'm still not into the rear phaser area yet. Okay, 13, he gets to go, and these 2 get to go. Those, and the Klingons don't. Okay. Forward. This is 15. Forward. I think they're going to win it. Forward. Okay. Turn 15. Forward. Still not there. And still not there. Okay, and then 16. Everybody moves. Drones move. Okay, and are we beyond? Yeah. Okay, so one Klingon ship can fire one of the rear. Let's see, Klingons. Let's see, that would be Klingon ship 2. And these rear cover left, rear, and left. Oh, and he's... So there's a problem here. He could normally have fired this, but the issue is that this one's out of action, so... That's it for the turn. Okay, we move to turn 3. Let's just change label to turn 3, and I think the Federation's going to win this one. Okay, we go to Impulse 1. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep my speed at... 15 is my speed. Okay. So nothing. These guys get to go. This guy gets to go. We go to turn 2, and I'm going to return. Now here's where his speed would be there, and then finally those guys get to go. Got to do those in the right impulse order. And then we go to turn 3, and this guy, the Federation, would go off the map. So that's that. Anyway, a lot to, if you're playing this solitaire and doing a video on it and everything, there's a lot to juggle with this. And I do try to do my videos as just kind of a one-shot through, and I'm trying to be fairly realistic with it instead of breaking it down. Plus, just the editing gets to be crazy if you're trying to edit a playthrough. So I don't try to edit those most of the time, but probably a lot of mistakes. Let me know down below what you see in this that I need to do differently. Like I say, this is kind of a learning process for me, and I appreciate you guys teaching me. So hopefully that'll, there'll be some interaction between us on that. Anyway, that's what I got this week. I sure appreciate you guys for watching. I always really do, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.